There we go. All right, so I think everybody on the call tonight, when you think about coming to the track, we come to have fun, but we also come to learn more about our driving and hopefully drive a bit better than the last time. And a part of that discussion sooner or later is, you hear the term driving at the limit. And we've all heard that term and read about it and so on. But tonight, I kind of want to talk about what that really might mean, or maybe better, how to think about it when we're on track. So with that, I'm going to dive into the slides. The slides are available online, and if you didn't get them ahead of time, you can get them after. And as I said, this will also get recorded and put up on YouTube. And once we're done with this presentation, we will jump into turn by turn at lightning. So hopefully everyone can see that, and we can get ourselves going here. Give me 1 second to rearrange my screen so that I can see everybody. There we go. All right. Okay. So again, welcome to the advanced class for lightning. Thanks everyone for joining us. The normal disclaimer that when we drive on track, we take risks, and we knowingly take those risks. So tonight, I want to spend just a few minutes talking about what is the limit, in particular, as that applies to us as a driver, and to some extent to the car, or more specifically the tires. And the meat of what we're going to talk about is how to safely approach the limit, some of the prerequisites, some techniques, some tips, for doing that. Before I dive in, though, I want to emphasize that it's important to think about how close am I to my limit when I'm driving. And that really revolves around knowing yourself, never really pushing, and dealing with what Dennis Mascio calls the real fear factor. Now, Dennis, if you don't know the name, was for years and years the instructor, the head instructor at the Bertel Roos driving school. He's now the track manager, head instructor at Monticello Motorsports Club, and has decades worth of racing and driving and teaching driving experience. And so he talks about, don't ignore fear, even if somebody else can do something you can't do. If they can go faster and execute a turn or a technique better than you can. He said this is an intellectual sport. As we get better at it, the fear factor goes down, but we have to sneak up on that threshold and stop at a given level until it's rote. And he also says consistency reduces fear. Now, if you want to listen to him explain this, as well as how to drive a good part of lightning, the link that's here to the YouTube when he spoke last December at one of our online meetings talks about this and the stuff I have in quotes here and a whole lot more. And it happens that he's going to be speaking again in an online YouTube live session next Wednesday, and that's after lightning. But he is a real character, if you will, and definitely worth listening to, either on the recorded version or the live version next week. So with that in mind, let's start with the driver. And before we talk about the limit, we have to be aware of what the limits are on each of us as a driver when we get in the car. And that starts with our physical condition. If we aren't in good shape physically and mentally, then obviously we're not going to do well on track. And so these are some of the things we don't want to do, right? We don't want to be tired. We don't want to be distracted. We don't want to be rushed. The flip side of that is, okay, if we think we want to improve and we want to go faster or do something better, what do we have to do to get ready? Well, we should be in good physical condition. We need to be seated properly in the car. If the seat's uncomfortable, if the belts aren't working quite right, whatever it happens to be, that's going to get in the way, right? We have to start with the positive learning attitude, the learning mindset Ross Bentley likes to talk about. And then we need to prepare. We need to focus on a particular corner or a particular technique. And before we get in the car, we can visualize that, just like Ayrton Senna is in the photo here. Once we're in the car, we need to be relaxed. We've all seen in-car photos of pros in the car. They always look relaxed, right? That's what we need to be looking like when we're in the car. And if we're going out to improve, to get closer to our personal limit, we have to be focused on one thing, one corner, one technique, or whatever. We'll talk about that. Everything else in that lap needs to be consistent, a consistent baseline, because we can't work on a corner or braking or whatever it is unless we're doing it off of a baseline. Now, if we're trying to improve a particular corner, then we need a mental image of what success is. We've thought about it before we went out on track. We have a picture of what it should feel like or look like in our minds. That's the mental image. Then when we're on track, we're in full sensory input mode, a la Ross Bentley. We're paying a lot of attention to what the car feels like, what it sounds like, what the track looks like, and so on. So here's an example of, if we said, well, we want to get a little bit better at turn one by improving our braking. So here's some steps to think about. Are we executing it consistently now? Is our heel and toe consistent? Is our current braking point and speed when we get to it consistent? And really consistent, meaning we've measured it. We know if we're braking at the 4 marker that we're at 123 miles an hour or 6,000 RPM, whatever the index, whatever you index to. And then we set a target. Maybe we want to brake 5 feet later, or maybe we just want to brake a little softer, which is actually a better technique. So instead of getting on the brakes at a 9, we're going to get on them at an 8. Brake pressure at the same point. In the paddock, we can think about that. We can visualize what half a car length looks like. We can visualize what a softer brake, pedal, slightly less brake pressure feels like. And then when we go out on track, we can practice that, by starting out at a reduced pace and working our way up to it. If it works, and we can do the rest of the session at that revised braking technique, then we've incorporated that into our baseline. It's now part of that consistency. If we can't do it, if it doesn't work, if we're in the corner too fast or we're not comfortable with it, then we go back to what we were doing before and work on something else. So very methodical way. And this is taken straight out of the book of how pros work on this stuff, right? If you're a pro racer and you're trying to sneak up on the limit, it's exactly what they do. It's exactly the steps that they go through. Now, I have to put a caveat in here. Everybody on this call has quite a bit of experience, but these techniques only work if we're really consistent. And one measure of that I think I took from Dennis Mascio, or maybe somebody else, I can't remember. I think it was Dennis though. Was 20 laps within plus or minus 0.2. And you could apply that to a particular corner. If you were indexing your entry speed and your exit speed, and they were very consistent for a whole bunch of laps, you could apply the same thing. If you're not consistent, then here's some of the things to work on, right? I'm not going to go through the list, but this goes back to having that consistent baseline. And I've been repetitious here a bit on purpose, just to emphasize how important that baseline really is. Now, as I said before, we have to approach working on one thing at a time. Well, what is the one thing? Well, if you're having trouble with turn one, it might be turn one. excuse me, if you're having trouble with, coming off the brakes smoothly, then it would be brake release. If you're having trouble being smooth with the gas pedal, it might be, the gas pedal. And as we get experience, most of our focus ends up being on the transitions that you see listed here. Is our steering input smooth and consistent? Our brake application, heel and toe, most importantly, off the brake release. And sometimes we're not consistent with where we get on the gas or where we get our foot on the floor. And these are all things to think about working on, to get better. And obviously we want to work on one at a time. And this graph, which is up here, if I can get here we go. This graph here, it's hard to see the yellow line, but if you see kind of sneaking up on some theoretical limit, now a pro might be able to use the blue line here, right, where they can quickly get up and make minor variations around it. But if we follow the red line here, that's not so good because we've gone way over whatever the limit is. That may not be a good idea. So just a conceptual way to think about how to sneak up on getting better. Now the tire or car part of this, I'm going to go through this quickly, but it does help us understand why we have to work our way up to it. Now, slip angles are the engineer's way of talking about how tires work, right? We turn the car, and even after the car is taken a set in the corner, the steering wheel, the wheel is going in a slightly different angle than the tire itself. And that's what you see here with the tire patch being distorted. The red line is the direction of the tire. The dotted line's the direction the wheels actually turn. That angle in between is the slip angle, and you've probably felt what the car feels like when it's not quite, doesn't seem like it's pointed quite where you steered it to. Well, that's a slip angle. Tires, different tires have different slip angles. Street tires, look like this. Racing tires are compound tires, generate greater slip angles faster. So that's why we all like sticky tires, right? This is the important part. Every tire, regardless of whichever one you want to look at, has this curve here, right? The traction goes up, it levels off, and then it drops down, and eventually it goes to zero. Well, you see three different boxes, and they're a little bit hard to see here, but you see, the biggest box here, this labeled talent, is somebody who can drive pretty much across that top of that curve, right? And this is written by Carol Smith, who was a race engineer for a lot of big name people. So this is written for pro race drivers in mind. And then he uses this smaller rectangle. He calls that excellence, where somebody's using the slightly taller part of the curve there, right? And then the little skinny one that uses just the peak of the curve, he calls excellence. So that's one way to think about it. We should all just be very happy if we can operate in that talent mode. I'd be very happy to be in that range. Here's what we don't want to do. He has a similar graph where he talks about how beginners, they're all over the map. They're part of the time they're over in this part of the curve, part of the time they're over here. But then he describes what he calls an idiot, a person who's basically over driving, right? Whereas if you're on this side of the curve, you have pretty even, controllable, predictable behavior from the tire. If you get over on the other side, the car is now less predictable. You may have understeer and oversteer, and guaranteed you're going to overheat the tires, right? So we all watch pro races and hear the commentators talking about tire management and the racers themselves after a race. Well, this is the physics or the engineering, if you will, behind it. So, so how do we know where we are? If you haven't thought about that, or if you have thought about it, and you're not sure. Well, how close to the limit of the tires am I getting? Well, to start with, you're using the whole width of the track. Does the car feel like it's sliding? When the car is cornering hard, it's actually not sliding in the sense that the rubber is, sliding across the pavement, but it feels that way. And if you're very close to the limit, you can steer the car with your feet. In other words, you can feel what the car does if you give the car just a touch more gas, or a touch less gas, or same with the brakes. If you're right up at the limit of the tires, most of you have done skid pad events where you've steered the car around a skid pad with the gas pedal holding the steering wheel steady. Well, that's because if we're on a skid pad and we're up at the limit, if we give the car more gas, the front end loses grip and the car runs wide, right? If we come off the gas just a little bit, the front end will tuck in and tighten up the circle. And it's the same on the track. And so I'm not saying everybody should aspire to get to that level of sensitivity, although that'd be great. But these are factors you can think about that when you're on the track. And then the other one, back to Dennis Maschio's comments, is it scary? I mean, if you're scaring yourself, well, you're probably at your personal limit on that corner or that technique, and you need to be aware of that and factor that in. And none of these give you a black and white answer to the question, but they give you something to think about, or at least I hope they do. Now, if you wanted to say, I want to get closer to a cornering limit in a corner, that's harder than thinking about the braking exercise earlier, but you would pick a relatively safe corner. That if you're thinking about lightning, maybe turn 4, for example, right? I don't think you'd pick turn 1, to unless you're really way under driving. And we'd approach this in the same way that we did the braking. Is our current driving very consistent? Have we indexed entry speed, exit speed, and do we know what those speeds or RPMs are? Do we know exactly where we're coming off the brake, where we're getting on the gas, where we're putting our foot on the floor? What does the car sound and feel like in the middle of the corner? Are the tires, making noise? What is that telling us? And what does it feel like? Back to my earlier point, does it feel like the car is sliding a bit? What does it feel like? And then we can visualize, okay, well, maybe we want to get on the gas 3 or 4 or 5 feet earlier. Maybe we want to try to corner a little bit harder, coming in with a little more, entry speed. We can visualize that. We can go out and try it, and see what we learned. Now, of course, these skills are best learned at an autocross or on a skid pad, but at slower speed corner, like turn 4 at lightning, you could work on these kinds of techniques and be in a relatively safe environment to do it. Now, for many drivers, especially ones in the white run group and some in the black run group, the biggest improvement usually comes from getting on the gas sooner or getting on your foot on the floor sooner, because too many people overdrive entries to corners and it limits their ability to come out of the corner. Now, I'm not saying that applies to anybody on the call, but I've seen it way too often. So I know that's a common situation as people try to get to the point of driving well, but want to get better. So just to wrap up, driving at the limit has to start with the driver with a very consistent, solid baseline. To improve, we have to focus on one item. We have to really get that seat of the pants developed. And then we sneak up on the limit with small steps, with visualization, lower speed practice, and we index our way up. And eventually that gives us a new baseline. And while you probably don't have to, it certainly helps to understand the physics, that determine what the limits on the tire and the car are. So I went through that quickly on purpose. So let me stop that and see if there's any questions or comments before we get into the turn by turn. Or maybe I went too fast.
No, that was great.
Okay, all right. It's yeah, I sometimes hesitate to even talk about driving at the limit, but I know it's a discussion that comes up and people ask about it. So I thought we'd try to deal with it in sort of a disciplined or organized kind of way. Again, stolen from how the pros work on the same thing. Now, in their case, they're much closer to the theoretical limit of the car than you or I are, but they still are trying to solve the same problem. Just they're solving it in hundreds, and we're probably solving it in tenths and that sort of thing.
I have a quick comment, Bill.
Sure.
And this is something, first of all, I'm more of a kinesthetic driver. So I drive a lot by the seat of my pants versus being an ocular or other sensory input.
Sure.
For me, I know you could obviously feel if the car is understeering or oversteering in the seat of your pants and in your inner ear. However, I've noticed that I could also feel when, okay, I'm taking this corner a little bit faster, or I'm braking less, or I'm braking more. I blew it. I have to remember to brake less next time. So I think for me, that plays a big factor in working my way up to speed or getting myself to the next level by listening to what I'm feeling. Or well, that didn't make sense, but by analyzing the input.
That makes sense, Zoltan, because when we're cornering hard, we have a whole lot of our body pressed against the side of the seat, right? And so there's a lot of we're feeling a lot, and there's a lot of sensory input, to use the fancy term there. So to the extent that we're sensitive to that, and you can remember what it felt like the last time through the corner, and this time now it feels a little less or a little more, that's absolutely spot on. For some people it's the visual picture, like you said. Some people go by kind of what the visual picture looks like, but some for many people feel what it feels like is absolutely correct. So yeah. That's perfectly not only fine, but I think normal and a good metric to rely on.
Right. What I found is there's a fine line between knowing you're going faster and then getting that pucker factor, which pucker factor is usually followed by something that can become catastrophic. Yeah. So finding that line is good. I have also found that as an instructor, being in tune with that also helps, because then I don't have the ability to check speed every time we're entering a corner or to see the driver's brake pedal pressures and anything like that. However, I certainly can feel when he's going into a corner a little faster, or faster than I believe his wheels could handle. And I've just noticed that a lot lately, especially this season.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, any other questions, comments? I'm going to bring up the turn by turn here. So hopefully, there we go. Okay. All right. Okay, so if we can get it to wake up here. There we go. There we go. Normal disclaimer. So passing zones at Lightning, just a quick refresher for everybody. Mandatory passing on the right, on the front straight between 1 and 2. And in the other two passing zones, they're, between 5 and 7, it's on the right early, on the left later, and the reverse between 7 and 9. So I think that's pretty obvious to most people. If you're driving in red or black and expanded passing, we allow passing any place with a signal, except those mandatory sides still apply in those locations. So you can, you can pass, between 4 and 5, for example. That's a easy place to get a faster car by in red and black. So passing zones, hopefully no surprises there for anyone on the call. Skip that. I'm not going to run through the video. So anybody on this call that hasn't driven Lightning? I should have asked that before. So if everyone has, then you all can, can and should jump in here with both questions and comments, so that I make sure not only that I answer questions, but you may have observations that can help other people here. I make no claims of being an expert at Lightning. I've driven Watkins Glen enough times I can claim some level of expertise, including being in cars with a pro there, but I can't say the same for Lightning. So anyway, turn 1, the right-hander at the end of the front straight. There has a hill in the middle of it, obviously. So that allows us to modify what would otherwise be the line here. We can turn in a little bit earlier, and we can brake a little bit later, but we do have to get the turning done earlier than we might otherwise like, because we need to be straight going over that hill. And we need to be back on at least some power, not full power, especially in a stronger car, but and we don't want to be all the way track left going over the hill, just to give ourselves a little bit of margin, because we're dealing with a blind hill here, right? And if we're not straight, or we end up too fast in here, if you do the smart thing and drive off, it's no big deal. But if you get in too hot and try to save it, then the consequences are ugly. It's unfortunately we've seen too often. This is kind of what it looks like. You can see the hill as we're in the braking zone, approaching the corner. Here you can see it is uphill. Some people like to run on the curbing here, at least the first few inches of it. A lot of people use a lot of the curb here. In my experience, some cars are okay with that, but a lot of cars, get upset by hitting the curb here. So, take your pick here, but just that's part of being consistent. If you're going to consistently use a lot of curb here, you need to be aware of what and how your car is doing to respond to that, and respond accordingly. Track outs over the hill, just a reminder, pit out is to our right here. So we'll see cars as we come over the hill entering the track. But the key thing is straight over the hill and give ourselves a little bit of margin, because now that we get over the hill, we can see where track out is and can see where all the people have driven off in the dirt here, right? And hopefully driven off and not tried to hold it on the track. But please, if there's questions as we go around the track, jump in. Like I said, I'm not pretending any wizardry here. Everybody knows turns 2, 3, and 4 are connected sequence here. And I commend Dennis Maschio's YouTube to you, because he goes into quite a bit of detail on explaining how to drive this. So I'll try to explain that. But I think most people drive 2 and 3 using this line where we don't apex turn 2 all the way on the curb. We're 4 feet plus or minus off the curb for the apex of 2. The objective being, I think I have it here, the objective is one big arc between 2 and 3, so that 2 and 3 are one corner, one turn of the steering wheel, where we're lengthening, our purpose is to lengthen the straight section between turns 1 and 2, and to carry as much speed as we can, through 2 and into 3. And for most people, that apex off the curb at 2 helps us do that. And that puts us out track left as we exit turn 2, but the same arc of the wheel brings us right back into the curb on the inside of turn 3. And in fact, we want to drive right over the beginning of that red and white curb at turn 3. So let's see what that looks like. Here's the approach to 2. This is the apex. I don't think in this particular photo that I grabbed that I'm the full 4 feet off, but so may not be the best photo, but the idea is the one big arc. Here you can see kind of, at the bottom here, the turn in for 3, which is just a continuation of that arc. And when I was before talking about driving over the curb, I was talking about this curb right here. So we want to just use the beginning of that curb, drive right over it. At least in my experience, that continues that arc and sets us up to use as much of the track as possible as we head to turn 4. Now here's what that looks like as we approach 3, and here's that curbing again. The cone in this case, in my view, is way too late. I'd be on the early part of that curb, and then I'd be coming off of it. But the reason is that there's kind of 2 ways to approach turn 4, and the wider line that I've shown in red on this slide is kind of what we often teach, but isn't always the fastest or most comfortable way through there. So there's 2 options here, and the Dennis Mascio version and lots of other people's version is to basically ignore, if I go back here, is to ignore having the car mid-track here, but just as we exit, if I go back to, as we exit turn 3, we just basically take the car straight for the apex at turn 4, and ignore trying to get back to the right side of the track, and allowing us to, again, carry more speed all the way into turn 4. And as the slide says, some cars may require a tap of the brakes to help the car turn. The reason why that works is there's good grip and a little bit of favorable camber at the apex of turn 4. And there's a fair amount of track out. But the key thing here is that that allows us to carry more pace into 4 and lengthen that fast section that started exiting turn 1. So 2 different ways to drive this, 2 variations, I should say. But if you haven't tried one or the other, try the other one and see what you think. But these are the 2 main variations that I'm aware of for turn 4. It's hard to see in the photo here that there's favorable camber here at the apex, but you can feel that, or if you're to walk the track, you would see that. Here's track out for 4, lots of room out there. Turn 5, another turn dictated by the hill that's in the middle of it. And in this case, it's an important turn. It leads on to a fast section in the back, but it really has to be done, in some ways even more carefully than turn 1, because while we're not coming into it nearly as fast, it's a steeper hill, and the line after the hill is not straight like it is after 1. So, and in this case, the apex is blind over the hill. So we want to get, just like in turn 1, get the turning done going up the hill, and be careful with the power until we get to the hill. And in this case, this is more an issue for students, but we want to use all the track here at track out. So approaching the corner, the curb on the left here, most people drive this by lining the car up with this curb and then turning kind of at this last red stripe that's on the left side here. And obviously we can't see the apex from the turn in. We can't even see it as after we turn in and head up the hill. It's still blind, right? We have to be well and truly on top of the hill to even see the apex. And I strongly recommend to everyone, including students, to just drive right on this curb. In general, I'm not a big fan of using a lot of curb, but in this case, the curb is friendly and it really helps the angle of the corner to use a lot of this curb. Put the right front, put the right side right on the curbing here at the apex of turn 5, and then let the car track out as it comes down the hill, and use all of this track, because that makes it safer, number 1, and number 2, helps us set up for the fast kink and 6 that follows here. Turn 7, lots of people's least favorite corner at Lightning, I think, and certainly where way too many mistakes are made. This corner gets overdriven more than any other corner at the track, and frankly, I guess I know why, but there's still no explanation for it. This is a slow in, fast out corner. Almost everybody brakes too late, trail brakes too much on this corner. Almost everybody. And it doesn't help that the brake markers are way too late here. Most cars need to brake before you get to the bridge or at the bridge at the latest. And if you wait till the brake markers, there's almost no way in most cars that you're going to get stopped down in time. Also on this corner, the apex is earlier than you might expect. I'll explain why in a moment. But it's very early on the curbing. It's the second red stripe, or maybe even sooner than that. And it's all because of the camber. There's favorable camber there, unfavorable later. So we want to do that. And we want to turn in at the end of the right side curb. And that wants to be the slowest point in the corner. We want to actually gain speed after we turn in here, unlike a lot of corners where we're still slowing down, getting to the apex. Dennis said, I don't know what car he was driving, but he was gaining 7 miles an hour between turn in and apex here, which is a lot. So point is, this is a slow in, fast out. You can even turn the car in a touch more when you get to the apex and take advantage of that extra camber that's there, just for a moment, to help your way through the corner here. So everybody knows, the bridge is here that dictates or sets up the braking zone. The braking zone's downhill, of course, a bit here, which doesn't help. It often feels a bit slippery to me. Certainly if it's wet, the braking zone here gets very slippery. But even in the dry, it's downhill. The corner invites you to brake late, and guess what? You end up off the track. Or if you don't end up off the track, you just end up slow exiting the corner. So turn in is right at the end of the curbing, right where the cone is in this photo. But again, this should be the slowest part of the corner. as soon as we turn here, we should be starting to pick up a little bit of gas. The apex is early. A few years ago, this first white bit of concrete wasn't here, and everybody, myself included, was apexing literally on the beginning of the curb. And they put the extra concrete in because it developed a big hole. But it's still, the apex is early here. A lot of people are apex this corner too late. And if you do apex it late or whatever, you can run out of track here. That's the other reason it's important to manage the entry here and manage it properly, because there is the track is unfavorably banked as you get toward the track out here. If you've executed the corner properly, your wheels are essentially straight at that point or very close to it. It's not an issue, but if you haven't executed it properly, it can become an issue. Everybody's favorite, right? Light bulb or the bowl, turn 9. Again, there's 2 lines through here, and I'm going to illustrate the one that I'm most familiar with, the one that I generally teach, and that many drivers prefer, but there are some drivers who prefer the other one, and I'll talk about both of them as we go through here. So the inside line, which is the one I'm going to talk about first, we aim at the gap in the wall, we brake kind of in a straight line. I describe it as tossing the car into the banking. Just let the car's momentum carry it right into the banking, but no more than halfway up. And then get the eyes around to the right, a long ways around, look for the culvert, which is on the inside and opposite more or less where the apex is, and gradually bring the car down to that. The alternative line enters much closer to track left on, coming into the light bulb, and makes a big arc that has a slight decreasing radius to it, but one big arc with the objective to carry more speed, even though it's longer. And it's a line that Miatas like, apparently, and some other drivers prefer that line. I haven't done, 2 back-to-back comparisons enough to know which one's faster in my car, so I can't. I just generally I'm biased toward lines that have less distance. So what it looks like it is as we're approaching, you see the gap in the wall, right? Makes a nice visual to aim at. The other thing I want to call your attention to here is this white line. See the white that's brighter along the grass here than the rest of the white line? That little section there, which is, I don't know, 100 feet plus, is more or less straight, and it's a perfect reference for braking. Whatever amount of braking you need to do here, we can, the majority of it, we can do in a straight line right there, and then trail whatever amount of braking we feel we can trail up into the banking. This is kind of what it looks like, up a little bit further. As we get, even on this previous one, but certainly as we get a little bit further, the photo, even though it's a pretty wide angle lens, doesn't even get around as far as the apex. So our vision has to be, off the slide here to the right, right? Our vision has to be over here because that's where the apex is. So even when we're back here, our vision needs to be way around. We need to be thinking about way around to the right and get our eyes over there. And I don't have a good picture here that captures the culvert very well. I think my red circle may be where the culvert is, but I don't think we can, I don't think the slide has enough detail to pick that up. And then of course, track out on the left here, and leading to the front straight, but I think I have it covered here. So just to summarize some reminders, turn 1, if you're running wide for whatever reason, just drive off. And the same applies any place, but particularly there. Same applies at turn 5 that needs great respect to get that executed properly. Turn 7, we talked about, way too easy to overdrive it, get into it too fast. On the front straight, and this is what I should have emphasized a moment ago, we have to be aware as we're exiting the light bulb that pit in is over the hill on the right. It's blind, right? We can't see it. So if a car is pitting in, we may or may not see them. And if we give a pass signal exiting the light bulb, now both cars get crowded, never mind the pit entrance, because the track bends to the right. It technically has a turn number associated with it at that top of the hill there. So it's really quite a potentially dangerous situation, exiting the light bulb until we get over the hill onto the front straight and can see everything that's in front of us as we get on the front straight. So a lot of places that deserve respect to pay attention to. That said, lots of people like the track, and it is quick, and so so lots of ways to enjoy it. So questions, comments?
Bill, one question. For expanded passing in the light bulb, I've seen people give passes on both the left and the right. Is there a preference for which it should be, or is it, down to what the driver prefers?
I think it's down generally to what the driver prefers. I mean, my own view would be, well, in general, we all know that the car giving the signal should stay on line. So if you just follow that, if I were to give a signal in the light bulb, if it was early in the light bulb, I'd give a signal on the right, because I'm in the middle of the light bulb and there's room on my right. I can stay on my line, and the car can go underneath me on the bottom. If it were later, if I'm getting down closer to the apex, now I'm pretty much on the inside, right? Or there isn't much room left. And now I would give a signal on the left. But then I have to be careful that I don't track out too much until that car gets past me. Yes. So in general, that's how I would tend to do that, Tim. But if the car can get past you quickly, it's not too much of an issue. It's only an issue if the car is going to be alongside a bit, then both of you are going to have to adjust, to make that pass happen. Yeah. But it does work for faster cars to get past in there. There's no doubt about it. Because it is a quick section of the track. No two ways about that. Other questions, comments? Everybody's got it figured out, right? I hope. Okay.
You never forgot a track. You're always working on it.
Yeah, well, if it was easy, we wouldn't be coming back all the time, right?
Exactly.
That's how it works. Yeah, exactly. All right. Other questions, comments before we wrap up? If not, then everyone have a great event, and I hope you found some tips tonight that you can apply, and everyone stay safe. And I will see you very soon.
Very helpful,
Thanks,
Bill.
Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you very
As
much,
always.
Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Appreciate
Appreciate it.
Take to do this.
Good night, all.
See you, Bill.